see folks come in as they do. Welcome everyone to this ATS research webinar on leadership, where we will feature findings from the study on chief academic officers in ATS schools. We're grateful for your attendance. I am Debbie Jin, ATS Director of Research, and co-presenting with me is Randy McFarland, who is the retired Provost and Academic Dean of Denver Seminary. Having had 17 years of experience in those roles there, we invited him to be the role advisor for the study. Also from ATS is Monica Lockery, who is program coordinator for initiatives, research, and faculty development. We encourage you to read the full report on ATS's website, and you can grab that using that QR code that's on this slide. But Monica is also going to be posting the link to our website. And if you go there, you'll be able to read the other reports for the full study. We conducted 6 studies on all the senior leaders at ATS schools, so I invite you to do that as well. This is a little bit longer of a webinar than we've had for the series because we're going to be doing some additional things. So we're hoping, though, to have some time at the end to do some Q&A. So we'll invite you to submit your questions using the Q&A function because we're going to be turning off the chat function to the group for now. You can still chat us individually if there's some technical issues, but submit your questions through the Q&A function. All right, so let's move forward. I'm going to describe the study just a little bit so that we have the same context. It was conducted in 2020, 2021 as a survey to all chief academic leaders in ATS schools, and then 20 interviews. By the way, I'm going to be using a few terms interchangeably to refer to this group: chief academic officers, CAOs, deans. It all refers to the same role. The purposes for the study, especially for the industry, was really just to look at the role and the work. Has anything changed? What are the needs? How satisfied are folks in the role, etc. And then all of that was to inform some updates that we needed to do in ATS programming for this group. So that was for the industry. Randy, what were some additional benefits that you saw for those who work in the schools?
Oh, thank you, Debbie. And I'm honored to be with all of you today. And thank you for all of your contributions to the work of theological education. I think some of the benefits of a project like this can be the normalization of some of the issues for those currently serving as deans. In addition, some guidance for those who might be considering the role, some direction for schools that might be considering candidates for the position. And I would also add some suggestions for professional development and continuing education beyond what is offered by ATS.
Great, thank you, Randy. That's great. And I love your term about normalizing some of the issues as it's not just you who is experiencing it. The survey, we had a great response rate, 52%. And because of that, we had very good representation by type of school as well as individual. All right, so with that quick context, I'm going to take us to the findings. We're going to be presenting those in 3 segments, the first segment being the longest, and that will be the status of the role. Who are the leaders? What are their roles and responsibilities? What are some of the pathways to the role? And how do they feel in the role, etc. And as I said, as the last webinar of the study, or of the series, we're going to be doing some comparing across roles. The second segment will be the nature of the work, and the third will be future outlooks. So who are the chief academic officers? We found that on average, they were 5.6 years in service. So that's not the average tenure because we didn't go to those who left. So these are currently in the role. That is actually the shortest among all the senior leaders. CEOs was just above that at almost 6 years. And the longest were the senior IT and CFOs at over 7 years. In terms of what they bring to the role, and for this, it would be basically experience in a role as dean. We had a whopping 1.1 years average of full-time experience in that kind of a role. In order to get to that 1.1, we had 95 who reported 0 years of experience. Now, comparing this to the other C-suite or cabinet level leaders, though they had on average 4 years or more. So this was our first piece where we realized, oh, this is a unique group. So many are very new to the role. And this highlighted for us a need to address maybe some kind of orientation or some kind of introduction to not just to theological education, because many come from theological education, but introduction to the role of administrator or senior administrator in theological education. Other things that they bring: education, almost 9 out of 10 hold a PhD. Nearly 17% hold a professional doctorate. And you can see that that math adds up to over 100%. So we've got some overachievers in the group who are earning more than one doctorate degree. Just over half earned an MDiv, which is about the same as for the CEOs. So that's what they bring to the role. Now let's look at the paths to the role. So as far as experience, at some point in their career, most of the CEOs held some kind of previous job in congregational ministry, almost 2/3. That's a pretty big proportion, but it's not as large as the CEOs. Over 3/4 were in congregational ministry among the chief executive officers. Another surprising thing about this group was that the third highest was business. So about just under a quarter held some kind of role in business before, and that is more than, which was also surprising, than the CEOs at 19%. Now, where we saw a higher proportion of CEOs was in nonprofit. That was 28% versus the 23% among deans. Just prior to their current post, most were in graduate theological education at 59%, and that was much greater than the 44% of the chief executive officers. Next highest then was congregational ministry. Again, this was just prior to their current role, and that was about the same as for CEOs. I'm going to show you kind of a little bit of a busy chart, and I'll unpack it for you, but I wanted to do more comparisons across the roles. So let me show you what this means. So I'm looking at the 4 kind of standard C-suite roles. So the CAOs, CEOs, chief development officers, and then the chief financial officers. And what we see here is there's a predominance of the blue in the first 2 roles and a predominance of the khakis for the bottom 2 roles. So what this is showing us is that CEOs and CAOs are mostly from higher education, so grad theological education, undergraduate religious education, as well as non-theological higher education. Whereas for the CDOs and CFOs, they are mostly from nonprofit and business sectors. And I don't think that's not rocket science, but it does help to show kind of just how different it is. At the same time, there is a proportion of CEOs and CAOs that are from denominational leadership. So CEOs are more represented there, or congregational ministry, about the same between those top 2 roles. And then for CDOs and CFOs, a portion are also from higher education. So what does this mean? Grandy mentioned that one of the benefits of this webinar and the study is for those who are in searches for these positions, and in particular for the dean position. You might, if you're one of those schools, you might want to consider to take a step back first. What is it? What are the qualities, skills, experiences that you're looking for in this kind of a position? And be brave. Don't feel locked into, okay, this is the way that we've done it all along. But think about, what exactly do we believe is going to make a good leader in this kind of position? And then take a look at what consider expanding your recruitment venues and your recruitment targets. Okay, so roles and responsibilities. Well, let me take another step back here. In the senior IT webinar, we highlighted how many substantially different titles were reported. So 110 reported in that study, 27 different titles, very different, distinctly different titles. And we felt that the reason for that was that for most of this, or a lot of the senior IT folks, they were in the institution, but they had a different role and then got to the senior IT work added onto their portfolio. In the CEO webinar, we drew attention to how comparatively few titles were reported. Basically, it was just a single title, and that role was distinctly theirs. Here, for the CAO webinar, we wanted to emphasize that one of the distinctivenesses of the role lies in the high number of direct reports they have. So it was an open-ended item, and we coded all of those, and it was a long list. And let me show you some examples of what we saw per the respondents' survey, the participants' responses. So no matter the size of the school, each school has these areas. And then the dean has all of these direct reports, including some indirect reports from subdivisions within each of these areas, especially if you're at a larger school. So it is a role that touches just about every organizational area in the school. So academic, co-curricular, institutional, student, faculty, programs, all of these are under the dean, the chief academic officer. And as can be seen in this quote from one of the interviewees from one of the largest freestanding mainline schools, the dean's position really is the glue for the institution. Randy, what did you see from the study that reflects the distinctiveness of the role?
Well, our interviewer noted that the consensus was that the dean is necessary in theological education, and that because of the all-encompassing scope of the dean's work, there would not be a time when the position would be eliminated. One dean used the image of a spider in the middle of a web to describe the multitude of groups they interact with. They said, "There's nothing I do that doesn't touch one or more departments or other groups of staff at the school."
Absolutely makes sense. And we're seeing it here in our findings. As far as, so on top of the numerous direct reports, CAOs have their own areas of responsibility as well. So we asked, name your top 4 to 5 primary responsibilities. Again, open-ended item, and we coded. What we saw clearly on top in that tier, faculty oversight. So meeting with the faculty, hiring, evaluating them, handling faculty problems. 80% of the respondents reported that. Then we have strategic planning, largely in the area of program development, and then academic affairs and policies. So semester by semester schedules, assigning faculty course load, developing and revising policies and procedures, etc. Okay, so moving now to their journey in the role, we wanted to start with this question. How did you attain your current position? And we offered 5 options, which you can see there in the legend on the right. So starting from the bottom, the option was, I was invited. Then I agreed to be considered by a committee, didn't apply. Then we've got 3 oranges that were all related to applying. So they were asked to apply, and they did. They had a moment where they said, well, somebody has to do it, and then applied. And then finally, they knew the position was for them and then applied. So again, the top 3, the oranges, represent paths that included an application process. And this is what we found. This is for the deans, and this is for the presidents. Very different processes for these 2 roles. For the presidents or the CEOs, you see that over half applied for the position, whereas for the deans, almost 80% did not apply for the position. So the dean's role is clearly a tapped for the position type of role. And in some cases, we recognize that it's by design that there's going to be a short-term tenure because they rotate around the different faculty. So this raised a question for me as I was analyzing it. What might this difference in terms of coming to the role have to do with longevity in the role? And especially about some level of continuity or maybe efficacy for programs or initiatives that relate to the vision, the overall vision of the institution, but also in terms of maybe some lack of security, perhaps, or precarity for those who are in that role. Randy, I'm very curious. How did you come to your role? And did that pathway have anything to do with longevity? Maybe it didn't.
Yeah, well, my background included 15 years of pastoral ministry following seminary, then 8 years in theological education prior to coming to Denver that included both teaching and administrative work. And then at Denver, um, 4 years in an administrative and teaching position. When the academic dean was scheduled to retire, the president approached me to serve in the role of academic dean. While it was his appointment to make, he had me interview with the full faculty. They reported back to the president, who prepared a report for the board, which I certainly supported and encouraged to be shared with the full board. And my understanding was that he had board members vote individually on his moving forward with the appointment. In my case, having the community engaged in the extension of the call and being able to view the position as a vocation was very important. While different schools have different processes leading to appointment, I believe that encouraging broad community input affirms the call. As far as longevity is concerned, recognizing that I could draw on past experience and background and serve in the position congruent with gifting really did contribute to longevity.
Absolutely. So in your case, you were invited to the position, but there was a little bit of an expansion from that. So I get that makes a ton of sense. Thank you.
Yes, invited to the position. And again, because it was the president's appointment, he, I guess in theory, could have bypassed some other parts of the process. But I think having that kind of process was very helpful for me in terms of confirming the call and bringing the whole community into the extension of the call.
Absolutely. And you and I talked about this before, but it kind of reminded me of David, King David, coming into the position and kind of getting confirmation from the North as well as the South. So yeah, very, very wise. Thank you. Now, once in the role, we wanted to know how satisfied the deans are, and overall they are satisfied, but they kind of rated the lowest of all the C-suite roles. Of 11 work features, we wanted to know how they are satisfied with each of them, and they were most satisfied with the personal relationships with their coworkers, the work that they do, and the relationship with faculty. And most of these were also very important for them. So we're glad to see good alignment there. They were least satisfied with the salary and supervision and oversight they received. And we also looked at, for all of the leaders, we asked both how important these aspects, the work features were, and how satisfied they were. And we wanted to eliminate or kind of reduce the gap between those two. Now, for this group, the largest gaps between importance and satisfaction were functioning of the work team and the supervision and oversight they received. Randy, can you say more about this? Why do you think we have these findings here?
Yes, one dean noted in relationship to satisfaction with the work they do, one of my favorite moments is when you follow someone from being new in the institution all the way through graduation. You've had a hand in their development along the way. I remember one of our board members being asked why they contributed to theological education, and it had to do with the multiplication of their gift in terms of those who would go out and serve others. And I think that is one of the great privileges of serving in theological education is the multiplication of our work around the world. In addition, I would note that on the gap between importance and satisfaction, that there is no standard way in which the dean's work was assessed, and only 61% of those surveyed received an annual written performance review.
Very important pieces that you raised there. So one way to concretize satisfaction, so we wanted to get a little bit more nuanced on this, was to look at intentions to leave. You may be familiar with Frank Yamada, our executive director, his article in Colloquy, where he named how since 2017, over 600 senior level transitions, so this would be in the dean and president positions. Folks, we only have 280 schools, so 600 is a very large number in a very short amount of time. So this is something that schools probably should attend to because turnover is expensive. So we asked a number of different, like slightly, different kinds of questions related to their intentions to leave. And we found out that only 15% said they intended to leave their position in the next 12 months, which is about middle of all the senior leaders. CFOs were lowest at 11%, and senior IT folks were highest at 26%. Now, that's the middle, but if you add another 13% who are not sure, that's almost 3 out of 10 of the deans. We're not quite sure who those people are because some of them might be looking at retirement. And we did see that there was 44% that, some of them may be thinking about retirement, but we saw that only 44% see themselves as retiring from their current job. That's quite low. If you compare that to the CEOs, 61% said that they felt they saw themselves as retiring. So 44% is the lowest among the C-suite leaders. Other ways that we asked about this, we asked about if they had been actively looking for other jobs. And a large proportion said that they are not actively looking, but thought about leaving and felt they could leave. 6 out of 10 said that they've kind of fall into that area, that category. And that last one felt that they could leave. That deans were only second to senior IT folks, and we've already kind of shared how the senior IT there's more possibility of turnover there. So deans are kind of, there's a little bit there that we need to pay attention to. Now, the desire to leave may be related to job stressors. And so we asked about this. What dean worries keep you up at night? And they were asked to select up to 3. And the top, as you can see, is in its own tier, balancing demanding work hours with other responsibilities, dealing with difficult employees and colleagues, and solving enrollment challenges. I'm sure if I could see everybody, you're probably nodding your heads yes. These are certainly significant stress items, but are they related to intentions to leave? Remember from the previous slide, not a large proportion were actively looking, but we went and tried to predict who would be the ones who would be most likely to be actively looking. And we found that the strongest predictors weren't stress items. They were actually job dissatisfaction items, and particularly these 2 dissatisfaction areas. So the number 1 strongest predictor by far was dissatisfaction with the chief executive officer. So for CAOs, the desire to leave was not related to stress. The work they do obviously is stressful. You can see the items there. Those are stressful pieces. But it doesn't seem that that work leads them to want to leave. However, we all know that prolonged stress can eventually lead to dissatisfaction, especially if that stress moves into more dangerous areas, if you will, like chronic lack of recognition or toxicity or isolation and others. especially because in some ways the CAO, or that academic dean position, maybe there might be a feeling of being stuck between the CEO and the faculty. One person that I was speaking with who used to be in the CAO position mentioned how the CEO has kind of the board to be on their side. But what happens as a CAO if the CEO is not on your side and there's some issues going on with the faculty? Where does the CAO go for that? So there is very much a potential for isolation there. So how do we keep stress from becoming dissatisfaction and looking elsewhere? Well, we found some predictors in some of the other areas. So this is predicting actively looking for another job. And these were the strongest skills in the leadership skill area, as well as for spiritual practices. So you may know this, but in predictive modeling, the opposite is also true, because what we're trying to uplift is the factors themselves. So in this case, you can see that the ability to innovate, having good self-care skills, practicing Sabbath, and participating in the leadership of worship services predicts not actively looking. So you see how that flip side also works. And just a quick moment about this innovation, ability to innovate. I think that has to do with personal leadership skills, but it also has to do with the school's ability to respond to any changes or innovations that the dean wants to promote. Randy, we've mentioned already that you've had 17 years, a long tenure in your role, and I want to ask you a few questions. What of these findings resonate with you? And especially, I'm interested in hearing, how was your relationship with your CEO and why? And I think you said that you had served with 5 different presidents. So let me hear about that a little bit.
Well, I think, first of all, certainly a major stressor was dealing with personnel issues. I think that was a part of the emotional challenge and stressor. Other findings clearly resonated with me: the importance of self-care, the support of coworkers, satisfaction with the work, and a positive relationship with the president. Longevity clearly included some of those issues I've already mentioned: satisfaction of working in an area of gifting and interest, and being able to view the role as a distinct vocation. In my 21 years in a senior administrative role, I served under 3 presidents and 2 interim presidents. In the dean's role, specifically 2 presidents and 1 interim. I think some of the things that do contribute to building that relationship include building trust between yourself and the president, avoiding getting triangulated, becoming familiar with the concept of managing up. So an illustration of that would be recognizing that different presidents had different ways that they wanted to receive information. Open communication and access, ensuring the president wasn't surprised whenever possible. And I'd conclude with saying having a sense of humor.
Absolutely. What about ways that or personal practices that you developed to alleviate stress before they turned into something?
Yeah, I think even with the time constraints of the position, one of the things that was important to me was continuing to mentor students. I found that to be really life-giving. Maintaining regular exercise, practicing spiritual disciplines, staying engaged with family, serving in our community and our local church, all provided some additional support and outlets.
Now this one is maybe a little bit tougher to answer, and I actually regret that we did not ask a question about this in particular. But were there any school structures or other kinds of institutional supports that helped you in terms of keeping stress from turning into something like dissatisfaction or wanting to leave?
Yes, I think the line of accountability directly to the president was very clear. Receiving an annual performance review from the president was a part of the structure that was helpful. We participated in an ATS workshop on shared governance, and serving on the shared governance committee that included 2 board members, 2 faculty members, and myself and the president was extremely helpful. And then encouragement of colleagues and board and involvement with ATS.
I didn't plant you that way to to cheer for
That was
ATS.
unsolicited. Yeah.
Yes, it was. I think also another kind of structural practice I probably is, and you did it individually, but I think kind of somehow codifying that might be a good way to incorporate it into the structure would be kind of this making sure that you're not triangulated. That was, you mentioned that earlier on, and I think that's super important. We're going to move to our next segment here in a moment, and I invite you to enter questions again through the Q&A feature. In many ways, I'm guessing, again, I can't see you, but I expect that these findings do affirm the attendees' own experiences. I'm very hopeful that this is being helpful to you. Again, we're hoping to ask more of those kind of structural questions in the study's next iteration, so stay tuned on that. All right, so let's move to the next segment. This will be a little bit shorter. We're looking at the changes to the work now and employing, hiring, or retention models, as well as effectiveness in the role and the skills. So looking at the work itself and what has changed, where it has changed, we asked a question, reflecting on your predecessor and your own time in office, how has the nature and duties of your current position as CAO changed? And again, that was an open-ended item. We coded all of these. You can see a top tier there, institutional effectiveness and assessment, the need basically for evidence-based learning, assessment of student learning, even post-graduation student outcomes, faculty performance. This is all part of a different way of looking at higher education, which I think was needed and very valuable because it helps us to kind of stay true to what we say we're going to produce. And that's not been that long, maybe at most 2 decades long. Enrollment issues we've talked about already, and then expanding programs and curriculum development. Now, if you add to that a 4th one right there, which is ATS accreditation, those top four changes to the work, one dean remarked how they were surprised how much more reporting was expected than what they had thought that was going to be. So that is definitely those top 4 changes really do require a lot more writing and reporting. For comparison, the most frequently named changes in the executive leader study was more fundraising, more duties related to strategic planning, and more time on external relations. Right off the bat, you can see that this is very different kind of work, and perhaps even in different contexts, if you will. So maybe the CEO is kind of in an external context, and the dean's role or the CAO's role is more in an internal facing context. And I would imagine that because we are seeing these differences on this slide related to changes in the work, that the differences are even accelerating. The rate of change is growing as well. Randy, what are some of your thoughts on how the work has changed?
Well, I think clearly the pressures of enrollment, including in many of our settings, more students going part-time without a significant drop-off in the personnel needed to serve them well. I can certainly echo the comments on assessment of student learning and reporting. In addition, dealing with legal matters and compliance issues.
And I would imagine also, and maybe this is after you retired, but since the pandemic in particular, another set of big changes occurred related to maybe technology.
Well, yeah, I think the growth of online education and servicing students completing degrees completely online, current and future implications of AI, sunsetting programs that are no longer viable, and revising the duration and content of degree programs and designing new degree programs certainly seems to be a part of the landscape moving forward.
Yeah, and we're going to want to kind of collect a lot more information in maybe another set of leadership studies. So what kind of help do deans have for this new work? We asked a series of questions for just the top senior leader roles, so the deans and the presidents. And we wanted to find out kind of their hiring and retention models, a little bit more information about that. So, we gave a set of roles to reflect on for the deans, and then a different set for the presidents. And we asked first, how difficult has it been to fill or hire for the following positions? And this was on a 4-point scale, 1 being not at all difficult and 4 being very difficult. And as you can see, I didn't even put a 4 on here because it didn't reach to that level. All were about, for the deans, these roles, all were rated as only somewhat difficult. So in some ways, maybe the school is, quote, a seller's market, if you will. But the most difficult among them were the director of assessment and director of educational technology. So initially a little bit of concern, given that institutional effectiveness and assessment is what most say has changed. And then the most difficult to retain are the director of ed tech and the registrar. For comparison, the CEOs said that the most difficult to hire was a chief development officer, and then to retain was the same, the chief development officer and the technology officers. Likely because theological education is a bit of a foreign field to many who work in development or technology. Also, competitor markets in those fields do pay quite a bit more. So again, this is concerning given that fundraising and development work is at the top of the list for work that has changed for CEOs. So the combination of these two slides, it tells me that not only has the work changed, but recruiting and retaining for positions that support or partner with in that changed work is also more difficult. So it's something, again, for us to pay attention to as an industry. Okay, one more slide, and then we'll move on to the last segment. So are ATS leaders prepared for these changes in the work and other stressors? For those of you who have been following us in the series and looking at all of the different senior roles, this should be familiar to you. It's self-reporting on how the leaders feel prepared about different leadership skills. So it's the same set of leadership skills. And we've got kind of grades here. So the dark brown is completely prepared, all the way to the dark blue, which is not at all compared. And you can see this one, all of the graphs in the previous webinars ranked in order of the completely prepared. So at the top are the hard skills known to be important for all leaders to possess: articulating vision, communication, decision-making, as well as some soft skills. So generous listening, valuing human resources of the organization, interpersonal skills. So I was glad to see that CEOs feel mostly or completely prepared in these areas, especially a good combination of hard skills and soft skills. Near the middle are organizational skills, such as providing leadership for accreditation, strategic planning, as well as some interpersonal skills, such as ability to motivate others, delegating, conflict management, and change management. Now, these are in the middle, yet they are critical skills for the so-called internal senior leader, the one who deals with daily in-house activity. And CEOs feel less prepared in these areas. So again, something to consider. And recall that dealing with difficult employees is a top stressor. And while we saw that this interpersonal skills was in the top area, the top cluster, conflict management and mediation down here near the bottom, these are where CEOs report less preparation, yet they are key skills for dealing with difficult employees. Also near the bottom is financial management. And while that's not a key area of responsibility that was named, it was one of the changes that was mentioned in that second tier. And importantly, CAOs, remember we saw that there was about a quarter of CAOs who had some background in business. You see that those CAOs were much more likely to report they were mostly or completely prepared for budgeting and financial management. So again, those who are searching for a new dean, if that is one of the skills that you believe that they need to have, then maybe looking for that kind of experience might be in order. Finally, on this slide, at the very top is self-care. We were a little bit surprised about that, weren't we, Randy? It was also interesting to note that that particular leadership skill was marked second from the bottom by CEOs. And it's unclear exactly why there's such a difference. And I have my thoughts about that. We can talk offline about that. But I was glad to see that a large proportion of the deans feel mostly or completely prepared for this skill, given the heavy loads that they carry. But are all CAOs prepared for this skill? And if not, what are the implications for their well-being? We found that those who felt less prepared for this skill, so that's this bar over here, were much more likely to report often or always feeling burned out because of their work. That's a really important finding. Randy, what are your reflections on the findings of this slide, the leadership preparation and implications of any gaps?
Well, we've mentioned change several times, but I think, again, underscoring that it's really a constant factor. And with the administration having an increased role in initiating and championing change, the dean has increased responsibilities as a change agent. We're often finding ourselves in that position of implementing the changes that are decided upon. And leading adaptive change is certainly much more challenging than leading technical change. The ability to lead through change in a culture that can be resistant or slow to change is important. The necessary skills and an ability, as one dean noted, to manage loss and sadness. Making the changes necessary to survive isn't the only motivator, and includes seeking to fulfill mission and serve underserved populations. While the CAOs exercise a wide variety of leadership styles, when asked to choose up to 3 styles from a list of 10, the most frequently selected in order were collaborative, organizational thinker, and servant leader. I think continuing to address the importance of interpersonal skills for the position, including developing emotional intelligence, growing in differentiation, or as so well put by the Lombard Mennonite Peace Center, the ability to stay connected, stay calm, and stay the course. Really bringing, as Friedman notes in his Failure of Nerve, bringing a non-anxious presence to an anxious system is often the great challenge in leadership.
Absolutely. Non-anxious presence in an anxious system. Absolutely. So we're going to be moving on to our last segment here in a moment, and I want to again encourage you, if you've got some questions, to submit those in the Q&A feature. I did get one quick little chat about a slide earlier. I don't remember which slide that is, so if somebody, whoever asked that question about some colors on the slide, if you can put that in Q&A, then I might be able to go back and take a look at which slide that is. Okay, so let's move then to our last segment, and this is future outlook. So basically, we're wanting to show you some available resources that are available to you from ATS. But before we do that, I wanted to give you one last slide on some information, again, that we got from the survey. This was the question: if ATS were to offer programming and resources that focused on the following list of skills, I would be interested in participating. And then they were to grade those based from not at all interested, which is a 1, to mostly interested, a 3. And we put this in order, and the topics that were at least 2, where there was somewhat interest, were these. And what was really grateful to find was that all of those items are found in the middle to the lower half of the leadership preparation gaps slide. So yay for the deans, great self-awareness there about what they need and what they would be interested in learning more about. The good news is that ATS has already begun to address some of these top areas of interest in its programming and research. Senior academic leaders also indicated they'd be interested in cohorts that were of the same, from the same schools, presenters from the same schools. Now here, this is where the deans were unlike all the other leadership roles. In this case, deans at mainline schools and evangelical schools said that they would be interested also in learning from experts from outside of theological education. Interested in fewer than 3 days. And then also, unlike the other leadership groups that we studied, they were interested in having those events scheduled back to back with other ATS events or the biennial meeting. And they were also interested in one-on-one meetings with a mentor. And that makes a ton of sense to me, given just how many new deans we have in the mix. We carved out something like this for emerging leaders, trying to kind of bridge that gap between faculty and the dean role. And we offered that at the mid-career faculty event last year, and it was very well received. You'll also be interested to know that ATS is offering programming on conflict management, addressing resistance, working through change. And we've also just announced a tool that has been developed to understand the financial viability of schools' educational programs. That was initiated through the Research and Data Department and now has been given over to the Leadership Development Department, engaging the CFOs first. Also, I think there was a kind of an orientation to it in the School for New Deans. This tool is a way to customize sustainable business models per school. You can put input your last 5 years of data and then look at what the projected 5 years might be. And then you could kind of tweak that input, say, well, what if we change this? How would it change the outcome? So it's a really good interactive tool. Read more about it in this month's colloquy article. My colleague, Chris Meinzer, developed that tool, and he wrote about that in that article. So, so take a look at that October colloquy. Also in his report, and again, here's a QR code so you can grab that. Randy also highlighted cultivating healthy relationships between the CEO and CAO and prioritizing self-care as well as practices of spiritual formation. I think Monica is going to be posting again the URL to our website so that you can grab some of the other resources there. As far as upcoming offerings, I've got a list of about 7 or 8 things here. Some of them are in italics, and those are meant for your colleagues. But as the dean, you might have some influence there. I recommend that you urge your colleagues to send them to these events. The bolded ones are the ones that would be for you in particular. So let's look at them. So the CFO's conference next month, send your CFO. The Entering Student Questionnaire webinar is going to be next month. That would be great for you as a dean to attend that and learn about what the students are saying, as it will help you in terms of programmatic changes, as well as maybe even in your accreditation and kind of your comprehensive study. The Executive Leadership Intensive is in December. Again, recommend that to your president. The Accreditation Self-Study Workshop is in February. If your school is going to be undergoing the comprehensive visit in the next 2 years, you will have been invited to that. And of course, the Chief Academic Officers Society conference is going to be in April. And then the last 2, the new faculty gathering and then the ATS biennial meeting, of course, in June. One quick mention about that new faculty gathering. One of my hats used to be faculty development, and we've now moved that over to leadership development back into their portfolio. But when we were doing it, ATS's approach to faculty is very different from your typical scholarly guild meeting. In our work, Randy mentioned this earlier about organizational thinking. That's what we emphasize in our faculty development programs. We actually downplay disciplinary differences, the disciplinary subject areas. We don't group people by that. We group them by the type of school they are, the size of the school, because we want them to realize and do better at being a citizen of the institution. So deans who have sent their faculty always come back to me and say, thank you so much for recommending that I send, because they come back different. All right, so that's our presentation. I think we've got some minutes for some time for some Q&A, and I think we've only got one that has been sent through. So if you think of others, please do send them. But we'll move now to our Q&A time. And there is this one question, and Randy, I think it would be good for you, and both of us can maybe try to answer it. But the question is, regarding the greatest causes of work-related stress, are there resources you would point to that could offer support? For instance, resources that could help with balancing the demanding work hours or dealing with difficult employees and colleagues?
Yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit. I think that finding some of those areas that are really life-giving within the scope of your work. And again, for me, it was the mentoring of students. And it would have been easy to say, well, I'm just too busy to do that. But I think, again, finding something like that was life-giving. And then recognizing the importance of some of these areas outside of the school that would be important as well. One of the things that was important to me in terms of spiritual formation was being able to do something of a physical nature. And so I volunteered at a food bank moving boxes. Again, could have easily said, well, I'm too busy to do something like that. But I think it again contributed to my own well-being. I think the thing that probably has been different in retirement is doing a lot more reading of things that I would like to read. I found myself having to do a lot of work in the area of leadership related to the position that I was in, but certainly seeking to maintain some of this areas of self-care was very important for me. Exercise was important. Now, certainly, the time that could be devoted to that might have been impacted, but continuing to commit time to that was very important in terms of my ability to function in the position.
What I'm hearing you say, Randy, is that yes, you've already packed to the gills, right? In terms of the amount of work that needs to be done for the institution, but it's not a matter of figuring out ways that you will contract that, but actually prioritizing the self-care pieces is important enough that even if it means, figuring out what to do, maybe letting go of that will come later. The key is to prioritize the self-care pieces and the life-giving pieces. I get that. I would also imagine that things like connecting with peers and finding out what they do, or maybe you have specific questions about dealing with difficult employees and colleagues, because it is, as Randy said, kind of normalizing the issues that you face, talking to somebody who might be at a similar school as you, going to these events where the CAOs are gathered, connecting online through our engage.ats.edu. If you've not included, or if you're not connected yet to that, please contact me, we will connect you to that community. It's our online social resource, social community, actually, professional social community, where you can talk about things, and it's a private group, and you can talk about a particular issue or a concern with other deans. And so having kind of getting connected very closely to a community like that, I think will help you as well.
I think that's really important. And we didn't touch on this too much in the webinar, but again, to the extent you can find individuals who are serving in schools of similar size, denominational background. We have some deans serving in seminaries that are embedded in universities. And while there are a lot of commonalities, there are some unique features that are faced in each school, whether the appointment is for a term or whether it's more open-ended. I mean, all of these are just nuances to what we've talked about today.
We have another question here. So the school draws from the dean, draws the dean from among the core faculty, mainly because of budgetary reasons. And given what we've talked about here, what is that a good? What are the pros and cons of this approach? We may not have enough time to talk about all of these, but let me start, Randy. Maybe you can kind of chime in. One of the distinct pros that I see of that approach is that the dean coming from the faculty means that dean can kind of hit the ground running almost. There's a lot of administrative kind of skills and leadership that needs to be built up there, but that person will obviously know the school and will understand some of the kind of unwritten rules, unwritten cultural pieces, kind of the hidden curriculum, if you will. That person will understand that and will know how to navigate some of that. Now, the con of that is also that they have been at the school and they have had certain relationships with the faculty built up in a certain way. And so being able to break out of that can sometimes be quite difficult. Now, it will also depend on whether the president or the chief executive officer is new or has been there. So that there's a little bit of that kind of navigating and the dance that you have to do. Randy, do you have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've really stated it well. The advantage can be the relational capital that has been built up. But let's face it, sometimes there can be the feeling of, well, you've moved to the dark side. Now you're a part of the administration. So how do you, again, maintain those relationships that are very important in terms of leading change, because trust is so critical. And how do you represent the administration, well to the faculty, and represent the faculty's viewpoint to the administration? You really are very much in the middle, which I think we've touched on probably in numerous ways.
Yes, absolutely. And that's not to be taken lightly. That kind of role can be very isolating, and trying to find ways to make the connections a lot more solid and the trust built up more solidly, I think is very important. We have a question about CAO salary levels at ATS accredited schools. Yes, there is a way to find that out and to look at kind of comparisons. I don't think we have that for individual schools. In fact, I know for sure we don't have that at individual schools, but what we do have is kind of an average, and we have that over several years. So go to the ATS annual data tables. And I don't know, Monica, if you can quickly find that on our website. Again, it would be in the research and data section of the resources tab. And you can find annual data tables. And once you go there, it's by year. So you can look at several years. But picking one year, you can go, I think it's 2 years back, 3 years back maybe. And you can find that, and that will help you to figure out what is the appropriate for your type of school.
That's an interesting question because, one of the things certainly being faced here in the Denver area is a sharp increase in the cost of housing, and the whole
Mhm.
matter of relocation becomes a much bigger issue than it had been in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And region is very key to
Hmm.
understanding how you need to figure out what your pay is going to be. Well, we are at time. I missed answering the one question, and hopefully you can email me that question. I wasn't exactly clear on it, but uh, Monica is going to turn chat back on in case you want to say goodbye to some folks. Thank you, Randy, for your wisdom and your expertise. It was a joy to work with you on this project. Monica, always for your partnership in the work and for keeping me aligned, and attendees for your interest and engagement. We hope that you learned something of interest from this ATS research webinar on leadership. We'll be sending you a link to the recording and posting that to engage as well. Best wishes to you as you continue your work in theological education.